Good morning, one and all. This is Dr. Diana. Welcome to session 36 on modern software engineering. We have been dealing with agile software development methodologies. And once we have completed the syllabus and completed the revision, we started with some picture dictionary. In a picture dictionary, we have looked into 4 keywords per session. And for each keyword, we have seen what to be written in the examination. So in an exam point of view, we have understood these concepts based on some pictures. So I thought it was a very good way of learning though. Now these are the 4 keywords for today's session. The first one is risk management, then comes Slack, followed by stories and estimation. All of these are keywords and jargons used in agile development in the modern software engineering practices. The first one is risk management. When we think of risk, we can imagine a scenario like this. When a user or a developer is there, their goal is to reach that tree, but they have a hurdle in between, which is the shark. So the way or the process of identifying, we have a goal. In order to reach the goal, we have a stumbling block. To see what that stumbling block is called as the process of identification. Once you identify, then you analyze all the different methods to tackle that problem. Then you do some action. Once you analyze all your alternatives, you develop some action. In this, the user has developed a boat to cross and to reach that particular place. Once you reach, you then evaluate your action, whether it was successful or not. So this way of identifying a problem, analyzing alternate solutions, then performing an action and evaluating your action is called as risk management. Now, risk is any trouble that comes in your way that stumbles you from reaching your destination on time or in success. So anything that happens in between that does not allow you to reach your destination is an event. And this event, if you can think of it beforehand, it is called as risk analysis. Despite uncertainties, your stakeholders need scheduled commitments that they can rely upon. So when you commit to your stakeholders on when you will deliver your product and what you will deliver in your product, you have to stay committed to that schedule. Risk management allows you to make and meet these commitments. In risk management, a generic risk management plan can be given to any project. So every project faces a set of common risks such as turnover, new requirements, work disruption, and so forth. These risks act as a multiplier on your estimates. These risks double or triple the amount of time it takes to finish your work. These risk multipliers illustrate an important difference between risky and rigorous approaches. But if you use extreme programming practices in particular, if you are strict about being the done in every iteration that you deliver, your velocity becomes very stable. The rate at which you deliver your software to the client becomes very stable. And you fix all your bugs in every iteration, then the risk becomes even more lowered. So you will not have to fear any stumbling block before you deliver your commitments. So these are some of the generic risks. Apart from these risks, there are certain project specific risks as well. Now, to identify these project specific risks, you can ask some of these questions to yourself, and the answer to these questions can reveal you about your project specific risks. Example, you can ask yourself, what about the project keeps you up all night? What are you thinking about all the night about your project? Imagine it's a year after the project's disastrous failure and you're being interviewed about what went wrong. What answer would you give? Imagine your best dreams for the project and then write the opposite of the dream. How could the project fail without anyone being at fault? So if everybody did their best and still the project failed, what could be the reason? How could the project fail if it were the stakeholders' faults, the customer's fault, or the testers, or the programmers, or the management, or your own fault? List that down. How could the project succeed but leave one specific stakeholder unsatisfied or angry? What factor could you list to satisfy that customer? These are some of the questions that you can ask yourself to identify what risks you have specific to your project. Now, once you have your list of catastrophe, brainstorm on these scenarios. What do you brainstorm on? So what was the reason? How can you rectify and all these? From these scenarios, imagine your possible root causes. What in the depth actually caused these catastrophes? These root causes are your actual risks. The cause of these scenarios will lead to catastrophic results. So once you list down your risk, then you will have to rate your risk. How do we rate the risk? From low, medium to high, you can rate them based on two factors. One is the impact, the other one is the probability. The probability gives you how much probable the risk is to occur. If you have a risk that is highly probable to occur, then you might have to plan some action to overcome that risk. But if the risk is very, very negligible, say for example it doesn't happen usually, for 99.9% of the time the risk does not happen. In that case, we need not plan heavily on that particular risk. The second aspect is the impact of the risk. Now imagine, when I say impact, it could be the time by which I have to deliver the product, or it could be the cost or the man hours that is cost. So imagine a risk of the project manager leaving the company. The impact it has on the project is very high than a mission going at fault. So that's the impact or the cost it induces on the project. So based on the impact and probability of occurrence of the risk, you can rate your risks from low, medium and to high. For each risk, you determine the estimated probability and the specific impact to the project if it occurs, in terms of dollars lost, days delayed, or the project cancellation, and some other common possibilities. You may be able to discard some of the risks as unimportant immediately after you prioritize. Ignore unlikely risks with low impact and all risks with negligible impact. So after you ignore all of these, you will have your set of risks. Your generic risk multiplier accounts for those you already have. And for the risks that you decide to handle, determine transition indicators, mitigation and contingency activities, and your risk exposure. So for those that have high probability and high impact, only for them we are going to follow up our risk management plans. The first is a transition indicator. A transition indicator tells you when the risk will come true. Say for example, your risk is the project manager leaving your project. A transition indicator can be the project manager applying to a job in another company. So when he applies somewhere else, you should plan for the backup for another project manager for your particular project. So that is a transition indicator, is a signal that tells you that your risk is going to occur very soon. It is human nature to downplay an upcoming risk, so you choose your indicators that are objective rather than subjective. Mitigation activities reduce the impact of the risk. So mitigation activity means a backup plan that you have that you can rely on when the risk actually happens. Now imagine the project manager has already left. If you had another person backup as a plan who knows everything about the project, you can right away make that person as the project manager. So you prepare another person as a backup even before the project manager leaves. That is called as mitigation activity. So you prepare something as a backup even before the risk occurs. So mitigation activities reduce the impact of the risk, and mitigation happens in advance. You plan beforehand and then you prepare beforehand, regardless of whether the risk comes to pass or not. Whether the project manager leaves or not, you are going to have another person as a backup ready. And create stories for them and add them to your release plan. So whatever work you are doing as part of mitigation, you add them to your stories and you add them to part of your release plan also. A contingency activity means you plan and you work on something after the risk occurs. You don't plan anything beforehand. You wait till the risk occurs, and then at that moment you plan on something and to overcome that risk. That is called as the contingency activity. Imagine the project manager has left. Once he leaves, you put another person as the project manager. Maybe you had prepared for him in the mitigation itself. But once you make that new person as project manager, you will have to add one more person to the team who can do the work of the newly appointed project manager. So in that scenario, you have some additional cost that comes inside the project. So that is called as a contingency activity. Contingency activity also reduce the impact of the risk, but they are only used when the risk occurs. So they often depend on mitigation activities that you perform in advance. And risk exposure reflects how much time or money you should set aside to contain the risk. So right from the starting of the project, you think of what all could be your risk. So you put some money or some time separately allocated for managing when the risk occurs. To calculate this, first estimate the numerical probability of the risk and then multiply that by the impact. When considering your impact, remember that you will have already paid for mitigation activities, but contingency activities are a part of the impact itself. So when we talk about risk, we need to identify what our risks are, plan for them, then set aside some resources for them, then you will have to perform some contingency once the risk occurs. The next keyword for today is slack. What is slack? Slack is a free time that you introduce inside your time schedule during your planning. Every iteration in extreme programming has 2 weeks. So in every 2 weeks time, we have to deliver something to the client. An iteration plan says what all I should perform during this iteration so that I can give that deliverable to the client. So the iteration plan says these are the stories I will complete by the end of this iteration. Now when I plan that way, I also put a schedule for each of the team member. For team member 1, 9 to 10 am they will do this, 10 to 11 am they will do this, 11 to 12 am they will do this. Like that, for every team member we plan on a schedule. Now there is some amount of time that goes unaccounted. So when that happens, the team members are unable to stick to the schedule and they are unable to complete development of the story, which in turn results in not able to deliver what we promised to the customer by the end of iteration. To avoid this, what you do is you introduce some free time in the iteration planning itself. So when say for example, I can leave some amount of time free for every team member, so that if they didn't have enough time to complete their story by that time, they'll use this free time to complete that, and so that I can deliver to the client on time and as promised. So the Slack is a free time that you intentionally introduce into your iteration plan. Slack is a type of agile practice in extreme programming, and it is essential in planning for a successful sprint or iteration that yields consistent and high quality result. Slack assists in delivering consistent iteration commitments and high quality software. It helps us deliver on our iteration commitments. Imagine you have a power cable for your workstation which is just barely long enough to reach the wall receptacle. You can plug it in if you stretch it a bit, but the slightest vibration will cause the plug to pop out of the wall and the power to go off. So you can imagine I have come up with a schedule from 1 hour basis for every team member. So if there is a slightest interruption, I will not be able to stick on to that schedule. And in the plug scenario, if you lose everything you are working on, you cannot afford to have the computer losing the power at the slightest provocation, because my work is too important for that, and in this situation I would have to move the computer a little closer to the outlet so that it could handle some minor bumps. Then I would tape the cord to the floor so that people don't trip over it, and that I lose my power supply. Our project plan is also like that. It is when we plan hour wise in micro level detailing, we see that every programmer is engaged for every minute. But if we have the slightest disruption in that engagement, we will not be able to deliver our iteration commitment to the client. To avoid that, we are going to introduce some free time for the employee. Just like how I give time for the employee to develop, time for the employee to do some analysis and reporting, I also give some free time for the employee. This free time that is introduced in the plan intentionally is called as slack. How much slack should we introduce? The amount of slack you need does not depend on the number of problems that you face. It depends on the randomness of the problems that you have. If you always experience exactly 20 hours of problems in each iteration, your velocity will automatically compensate. However, if you experience between 20 to 30 hours of problem in every iteration, your velocity will bounce up and down. You need 10 hours of slack to stabilize your velocity and to ensure that you will meet your iteration commitments. So based on the velocity, you can determine how much amount of slack time you need to introduce in every iteration. Once you identify how much slack, how do we introduce the slack? Even the best teams inadvertently accumulate technical debt. Technical debt is a piece of code that is not very efficient in nature. So the inefficiency in the code or the performance lack in the code which is satisfying all the functional requirements is called as a technical debt. It is doing what it has to do, but the code can do a little bit better. That little bit better is called as the technical debt. Although you should always make your code as clean as you can, some technical debt will slip by unnoticed. Every iteration, you look for opportunities to make existing code better. Paying down on technical debt directly increases your team's productivity. As you fix the technical debts, you can focus on fixes that make your current work a bit more easier. The one way of introducing slack is called as research time. A dedicated research time is an excellent way to encourage learning and add additional slack into your iteration. To introduce it, set aside half a day of each programmer to conduct a self-directed research on a topic of his choice. But during that period of time, be completely hands-off. Don't interrupt with the programmer during that part of the schedule. So you give a programmer their own time to do some research on whatever they like. They can do whatever they want at that time. If they have completed their task and if they have cleared the technical depths themselves, that 3 hour or the half day period is free for them to do some research of their own choice. But if we have not completed our stories, if we are unable to deliver our iteration commitment, if the iteration commitment is at risk, you can cancel these two activities. One is the paying down of technical debts, and the research time can be cancelled, and that time can be used to develop the software and the functional requirement of the software so that you can deliver the iteration commitment. Use refactoring as a shock absorber. Before starting a big refactoring to pay down technical debt, consider the iteration plan and think about kinds of problems that the team has encountered. If the iteration is going smoothly, go ahead and refactor. If your iteration commitment is still at risk, you can incur a little voluntary overtime from your team members, but be careful not to overuse that overtime. Overuse will sap the team members' ability to do good work. You can use it to clean up after small problems, but each programmer should only contribute an hour or so. Only they should do it voluntarily. Don't do it more than that. And we see that there is a requirement for slack. Is there a possibility to reduce the need for slack itself? The two major sources for randomness in XP teams is customer unavailability and technical debt. So if you can involve the customer more, and if you can make the customer available for more collaborative work, or if you can clear the technical debt then and there, then you will not even need slack in your iteration planning. Both lead to an unpredictable environment, make estimations difficult, and require to have more slack in order to meet your commitments. So if you don't have these two, you can go ahead with your iteration plan itself. The next keyword is stories. What is a story? A story is a user's feature in agile development, equivalent to the requirement specification in traditional software development environments. A story is something where you can imagine with each user, the user requires a feature that they want the team to work on. So this is indicated as an index card, and it explains the requirement or the feature that the user requires. A story is to plan our work in small customer centric pieces. Stories are used for planning, and they are simple 1 or 2 line descriptions of the work that the team should start developing on. The story is everything the stakeholders want the team to produce should have a story. For example, these are example stories: a warehouse inventory report, a full screen demo option for a job fair, a TPS report for upcoming investor dog and pony show, a customizable corporate branding on user login screen. So any feature that the user wants in the software can be considered as a story. Each story should explain what the user wants. It should also explain why the user wants it, and it should explain to whom the story will be useful and when the story will be useful for the client. So if you answer these 4 questions about any feature that the stakeholder wants, it becomes the story. So it should answer what feature is required, why the feature is required, to whom the feature is useful, and when the feature is useful. So based on these, you can write the stories for your development. Although stories are short, they still have 2 important characteristics. The stories represent customer value and are written in the customer's terminology. They describe an end result that the customer values as important and not the implementation details of it. I can say I want an attendance report. I will not say the report has to be a report generated using Ruby on Rails on a HTML page that can be printed into a PDF document. All these aspects I will not say. I will only say that a attendance report is required from the software. So that is a story or a feature that the user wants. The second important characteristic is each story will have a clear completion criteria. Customers can describe an objective test that will allow the programmers to tell when they have completely successfully implemented that story. So for the attendance report, I can say if I give the student's roll number, I should be able to see that particular student's complete attendance history. That's my completion criteria. If I have done that, then the story is completed successfully. So each story will have a clear completion criteria. Now, how do I write these stories down? Like a good news story, 3 parts of the user story template communicate who, what, and why the story belongs to. It's more like an index card. So when I start writing a story, it should be like an index card shown like with a picture and some written note to it. So write stories on index cards, 3 to 5 inch cards, because they can fit inside your pocket. Use these index cards to be more responsive to the stakeholder suggestion. So every time the stakeholder gives you a suggestion, you can add that suggestion to the index card. Index card are simpler and more effective than the computerized tool of doing it. Once you gather all these cards, you can put them onto a board and organize these index cards so that you can focus on what is to be developed. And these stories are to be customer centric. A good way to ensure that your stories are customer centric is to ask your customer to write the story themselves, including any technical cost in the story, rather than having dedicated technical stories. So you have to add this story incrementally in the storyboard. This is the storyboard where you can place all your index cards. So each of these index card will have an information of what, why, whom, and when. So once you jot down your index card, you can put them on your whiteboard and then plan your iteration around these stories. You can combine multiple stories so that you can complete 4 to 10 in each iteration. Combining stories is very easy. You can staple all of those index cards and put them in the whiteboard together. or you can even split on stories. Splitting stories based on boundaries of data, or you can split them based on operations performed within the story, or you can split large stories into separate stories based on the read, write, update and delete, or the CRUD operations of the database. Or you can even split stories based on cross-cutting concerns such as logging in, error handling, all of these. You can divide your stories based on some of these concerns. Now, apart from these, there are certain special stories also. So, when in Agile, all our iteration planning is going to be around stories. So, all the team members are going to work based on some particular story. Apart from the stories, we have some special stories also. These are not part of the normal work of a team. They can be a documentation story, a non-functional story, a bug story, or a spike story. Documentation stories are built around certain documentation that you develop over your story. It can be a non-functional story where I address some performance aspect of the story and work on something that improves the performance of a particular feature. It can be a bug story where I identify a bug, where I explain how I identified a bug, how I overcome or resolve that bug. All these can be part of a bug story. A spike story is some research that is done on some specific feature of your story. Say for example, an attendance, you can think of what happens when I do this sort of operation in the reporting. So you can build your story around that, becomes a spike story. Now the last keyword for today is estimation. What is estimation? How do I estimate? What all do I estimate? And why is estimation required in our planning? When I try to estimate, I have to estimate the amount of time and the cost. Only then, based on that, I can check on my plan. I can plan accordingly. How do I estimate them? In terms of man hours or in terms of story points. Story points are nothing but the number of stories completed in every iteration. So I can plan based on the hours required or based on the story points required. Our goal is to provide reliable estimates, and programmers often consider estimating to be a black art, which means one of the most difficult things they must do. Many programmers find that they consistently estimate very low for their own projects. To counter this problem, they can pad their estimates by multiplying it by 3, which is the most common approach. But sometimes even those rough guesses are very much lower than what actually happens. So when you think about that, you get a question naturally: are good estimates really possible? Of course they are possible. You just need to focus on the strengths you have as your team. Now the story points are useful. They are useful long-term measures, but they are not useful in the short term. So I can identify what are the stories I will complete, and I will see how much time I can take for completing these stories, and I can analyze on that and come up with the estimation. What works and what does not work in estimation? One reason why estimation is difficult is that programmers can rarely predict how they will spend their time. The task that requires 8 hours of uninterrupted concentration can take 2 to 3 days if the programmer must deal with constant interruptions. It can take even longer if the programmer works on another task at the same time. Every team member or the programmer has additional responsibilities for documentation, clerical, administrative, and all these roles also. So it is highly likely that the programmer will have to face a lot of interruptions during their work. So they may not be able to dedicatedly spend time on one aspect. This is one reason why estimations fail. Although estimates are almost never accurate, they are consistently inaccurate. Or in other words, I can say even in that inaccuracy, there is some consistency over a period of time. While the estimate accuracy for individual estimates is all over the map, one estimate might be half the actual time, the other might be 20% more than the actual time. So the estimates are consistent when you try to aggregate these estimated values. Additionally, although each iteration experiences a different set of interruptions, the amount of time required for the interruption also tends to be consistent from iteration to iteration. As a result, you can reliably convert these estimates into calendar time. And if you aggregate all the stories in the iteration, you will need a single scaling factor only. This scaling factor is the velocity or the number of story points you can complete in an iteration. So this is the key factor in estimation. When multiple agile teams work on a project, they benefit from a common baseline for estimating story points. So the story point estimation is the major role player in estimating your time and cost required for development. So different teams come up with different story points. So velocity is to predict your next iteration's velocity. Add the estimates of the stories that were done in the previous iteration. This feedback leads to a magical effect. Now I count the number of stories I have completed in this iteration and I predict some value for the next iteration, which is close to this current iteration. When I do that, I can be pretty close to the actual estimation. When the team underestimates their workload, they are unable to finish all the stories by the iteration deadline. This causes their velocity to go down, which in turn reduces the team's workload, allowing them to finish everything on the time the following week. And velocity relies strictly upon an iteration time box. So to make velocity work, you should never count the stories that are not done at the end of iteration. And the second important aspect is never extend your iteration deadline to slip, not even by a few hours. So imagine a scenario where by the end of iteration, I am planning to count the number of stories that are done. One story is 99% completed, but I have not still completed that story. So what I do is I extend my iteration deadline by 2 hours to complete that story, and I count that story also as done. And then there is another story which is 99% done, but it is not complete. I count that story also as completed. So what I have done is I have added 2 stories to my current iteration, one by extending the deadline and the other one by counting it as done. So instead of counting 10 stories as completed in this iteration, I counted 12 stories in this iteration. So then the velocity for the next, the estimation for the next iteration would be 12 stories. So I need to complete 12 stories in the next iteration. Will I be able to do that? I cannot, because actually speaking, I can only complete 10 stories. But next time what will I do? I will be trying to complete 12 stories, but I will fail. So my estimation will fail naturally. To avoid that, you count your stories properly. So you count your stories, put them into to-do lists, in progress and testing, and only count stories that are completely done by the end of a strict iteration time box. So by that time, whatever is complete, only count those stories as completed. Only then you will be able to make good estimate for the next iteration. When you estimate, you pick a single optimistic value. Say for example, 10 stories for the next iteration. That's the estimation you can do. How long will the story take if you experience no interruptions? You can pair with anyone else in the team and everything goes on well. what is the amount of time or how many number of stories can you complete. That becomes your most optimistic value. There is no need to pad your estimates or provide a probabilistic range. Don't do that. Velocity will automatically apply to the amount of padding required in short-term estimations, and all the risk management plans that you come up with, it will pad for long-term estimations. So when you come up with this strategy, you can estimate fairly good enough estimations. So today's session we have seen 4 different keywords. Risk management. Risk management is where I identify, analyze, do some action and then evaluate based on some risks. So risk is something that can cause my project to fail. So you identify them, plan for them and then do something so that it doesn't cause a very heavy loss, and then you overcome the risk. So that is what is risk management. And then we looked into what a slack is. Slack is a free time that you introduce into your iteration plan, so that if the team member is not able to complete their task, they can use that free time to complete that task, which in turn helps you deliver your iteration commitments. By the end of 2 weeks, you will be able to complete your iteration as planned and you will be able to deliver your commitments. And the third keyword was stories or features in the user's development. So every stakeholder's requirement is counted as a user story, and the development process is built around a user story. And once you complete that user story, you will have to count that into your done criteria. Every user story has 2 major aspects. One is it delivers something valuable to the customer, and it has some completion criteria that is set by the customer. And the last keyword we saw for today was estimation. Estimation can be in terms of cost and man hours that are planned. So time and money are 2 things to be estimated. When we estimate, the factor called velocity helps us come up with better estimates. Velocity is the number of stories completed per iteration. So depending on how many number of stories I complete this iteration, I can estimate for the next iteration. So with this, we are completing today's session. Thank you one and all. This is Dr. Diana signing off. Thank you.